All right. Welcome, everybody, to another episode of the Chiro Podcast. This is the business and marketing podcast for chiropractors. My name's Jerry. I'm your host, and we're going to talk about patient communication today. And we're just going to talk about just a few tips, some things to keep in mind. This is a topic that could be discussed ad nauseum. I mean, just there's no really end to this bottomless pit of information on how to communicate with people, how to communicate with your patients. Chiropractors are in the people business. There's no way around it. And one of the things I kind of jokingly say is that if it weren't for the people, being a chiropractor would be easy. This is true for other people businesses as well. I say that with my pastor friends. I say if it wasn't for the people, being a pastor would be easy. Anytime you're dealing with people within a leadership position or even not in a leadership position, there's going to be difficulties. There's going to be conflict. And the better we are at communicating, the better the expectations are, the better the process goes, the better the relationship goes. There's always going to be those people that no matter what you do, even if you do everything right, that there's going to be conflict just because maybe it's their personality, maybe it's your personality, maybe there's just a rift that's there and it's not a good fit. But the goal of good communication from a chiropractor's standpoint is to minimize the amount or really eliminate the amount of issues that you have because of poor communication and make those issues that do come up the exception and not the norm. And when chiropractors first get started, a lot of the problems that they have with patient follow-through, expectations, even people getting upset. One of the things that I've said a lot on this podcast is that people don't get upset about how you run your business. They get upset because they thought you ran your business differently. That's communication. Like that's misunderstanding based on poor communication, whether that was poor communication through your marketing, whether it was poor communication through an individual who spoke to this person and said something that they didn't understand. It could be a lot of different things. But these little things are definitely problematic within a chiropractic practice. And the better you become at communicating, the easier your practice is going to be, the more successful your practice is going to be. Now, the bad news is that some people are kind of naturally better at this than others. The good news is that it is a skill and it is something that you could develop. And even if you're naturally better with people, I would strongly suggest that you be proactive with improving your patient communication skills and don't just rely on your natural God-given talent, because that's only going to take you so far. Like having a method to your madness is going to be a better way of going about it. Now, before we get too far into this, I do want to just say a couple things about Rocket Chiro. If you're getting started in practice and you want some help or you're feeling stuck, check out my Next Step program. It is affordable. It's month to month. It's for chiropractors and it's designed to help you get started or to help you get unstuck. So this is it's just great for chiropractors that are in a situation where you're just not where you want to be and you want some help and you want to get some affordable help, some common sense help with the business and marketing side of being a chiropractor. The other thing I'll say is if you want a better website, your website should be a huge advocate for your practice. Your website should be a plus for your practice. It shouldn't just be something that you have that's out there because you're supposed to have it and then it doesn't do anything for you. A better chiropractic website is going to help you attract more new patients, and it's going to help your practice grow. It's going to represent your practice well. If you go to Rocket Chiro and check out the Rocket Chiropractic websites, you'll be glad that you did. They're affordable, they're lightweight, they're new patient focused. They're really great websites for chiropractors. So if you want a better website, check out the Rocket Chiropractic websites. Last two things I'll say is if you want help with your Google ads or you want help with search engine optimization, those are also services that I offer. They are more expensive because of the nature of them. But if you are interested in that, I would love the opportunity to talk to you about those things and love the opportunity to provide those services for you. So if you're shopping around for someone to help you with your Google ads or someone to help you with your chiropractic SEO, I'd love to have my name on the list and have that be a consideration when you're making that decision. All right, so I wrote down a few things, and like I said, there's no possible way that we could talk about all of this on a podcast. So this is going to sort of be an overview of patient education and just some things that you want to keep in mind. These aren't in any particular order, but the first thing that I wrote down is that you want to have a plan to your interaction. This is really important because now there are times where you get into a human interaction with a patient or with a person that is not necessarily as planned. But a lot of the interactions that we have with people as chiropractors is sort of planned interaction. Like you're going to a health fair, you're going to a networking event, somebody's coming in for a consultation, you're going in to do a report of findings, you're going in for a regular patient visit. These interactions are planned out. You know they're going to happen ahead of time. And if you have a plan for what is the purpose of that interaction, that communication is going to go much better. Chiropractors tend to not really have a method to their madness when it comes to stuff like this. That is not a good way to go about it. You're going to have a quality control issue. You're going to have an issue with results, because if you go into it having no plan, how do you know you've even done what you should have done? And I'll just give you some simple examples. Let's say you're going to a health fair and you're going to have interactions with people. If you know ahead of time your plan is to find people that are a good fit for your practice and get them to schedule an appointment, that streamlines your communication. If somebody wants to stand there and talk to you for 45 minutes or an hour, you could ask them very directly, say, hey, is this something you want help with, or is this something you're just looking for tips? Because that can sort of help you understand who you're talking to. And if they just want tips, you can give them some tips, you can move along. If they want help, you could tell them, hey, getting into my office, schedule an appointment. This is the best way for you to get help. Let's talk about how we can do that. And you're moving that person in the direction that you want to go with that conversation. You're not just letting it happen. Same thing is true for networking. When you're going into networking, if you're just going to go in there and it's like, I'm going to meet some people and I hope stuff's going to happen, like that's not a great way to go about networking. If you go in there with the intention of figuring out ways that you can provide value to people, and teaching people how that they can refer to you and who you're looking for, that's going to be a much more profitable, much more beneficial interaction, because you know why you're there. Consults the same way, and I could kind of talk about all of these individual things, but I had 3 questions that I always ask everybody in my consultations, and it's because I wanted that information, because I was going to use that information. Chiropractors sometimes go into consultations and just talk to people with no real plan. Sometimes they even do exams with no real plan. Like you learned an exam in school and you're just asking a bunch of questions and doing a bunch of stuff with no real it doesn't influence what you're doing in any way, shape, or form. That's wasted time. It's wasted questions. It's just wasted opportunity. Have a plan. Know what you're getting into. Have a plan for that conversation. The next one's going to be listen actively. You're going to hear tons of people say this when they talk about communication. This is not my strong suit. I'm a much better talker than I am listener. So this is something that's very difficult for me in my personal life. It's very difficult for me in my practice life. But it is important that when someone's talking, you're not thinking about the next thing, that you're actually listening to what they have to say. You could do active listening techniques where you're nodding or you're making acknowledgments. You could repeat back what they have said so that they know that they have been heard. There are ways of listening that are better ways of listening than not. What I tend to do, because I'm a talker, I'm thinking about the next thing I'm going to say. I'm thinking about my response. This is really bad when I was in a scripting situation where when I was early in practice, I was taught scripts and I'm just thinking about my next line. It didn't matter at all what the person had to say. Like I had this kind of pre-planned script. I was told, if you want to be a successful chiropractor, this is the script you use. These are the words you use. And it really eliminated the other human being from the equation. I was just there to kind of deliver a script and close a patient. That's not a great way to listen. And it's really bad for someone who struggles with listening anyway. So I got to tell you, this is not a strong suit of mine, but actively listening is going to be a great way. You participating and allowing them to participate in the conversation. Like that's how conversations are good and how they happen. Third one's going to be just stay on track. You have to know the purpose of the conversation to stay on track. And so the first one has to happen before this third one can happen. If you know what the point is when you're talking to a person, you can help them stay on track, and you could also help yourself stay on track. If you've listened to my podcast very much at all, you know that I can meander around with things I talk about. This is also something that I struggle with. I'll tell a story or I'll get sidetracked on something. It's this not helpful in a business setting where you have a specific purpose and goal in mind for that conversation. You're in a leadership position as a chiropractor, so it's part of your job is to just help people stay on track. There's simple ways to do that. There's more complicated ways of doing that. Some people make it really difficult. The more you can stay on track, the better your communication is going to be. Next, one you hear a lot is going to be keep it simple. You hear the whole thing of keep it simple, stupid. People just don't retain tons of information. So if you are just downloading a bunch of stuff on them and you're not keeping the main things, you're really going to lose people, and you're kind of just hoping that they get it. You're kind of hoping that they're going to retain the thing that you want them to retain. This is something I take into consideration with my websites. When I do websites for chiropractors, I'm always trying to make becoming a new patient the main thing, and the process of becoming a new patient the focal point of the website. I don't want to add so much stuff to the website that now I'm stuck in a situation where I'm hoping that the person does the thing I want them to do. I want to guide them through this process. And one of the ways you do that is simplifying what you're presenting to them and making the main thing the main thing. So whatever the point is of the conversation, it sort of all builds off of the first thing where I said you have to have a plan. Whatever the point is of the conversation, you need to make sure that you're helping them stay on track. And you also need to make sure that you are focusing the conversation and the information to what needs to be said and what's most important, and take the opportunities later to have more conversations. If you want to build on conversations, you're going to have a relationship with this person. Like, hopefully, I mean, that's the plan as a chiropractor. You're building a relationship with this patient. You'll have the opportunity to talk to them later. Keep the main thing, and keep it simple when you're talking to them, and don't overcomplicate it. Next is going to be keep it specific to them. This is really important. And this sort of goes back to the script thing as well. Like, if you're generally kind of generically telling everybody the exact same thing, and when that person comes in and they say, I have XYZ problem, and you still give the same spiel that you're going to give to somebody that has ABC problem, that's a problem, because you are talking very indirectly to them. You're talking really through them and not to them. When a person has a concern or a question or an issue that comes up, you want to make sure that you're talking to this person about what they're talking about. If they ask you a question, answer the question. Don't Jedi mind trick them and say, like, you're not here for pain relief. You're here for subluxation correction. Like, that's, and I'm not saying you can't build a bridge to that, but you have to address what they're talking about, and you have to talk to them about the things that are important to them. This is why when I told you I asked 3 questions when I do the consultation, I always wanted to know, like, why are you here, and what are you hoping to have happen from your time here? Like, what's a win? The reason I wanted to know that information is because all of my patient communication from that point forward is going to be in the context of their parameters. If they're trying to feel better, like they want to get back to playing sports again, if they want to get to where they can hike, if they want to get to where they can turn their head so they can safely ride their motorcycle, I'm going to communicate what I do in a way that relates to what they want, so that they know we're here for them. Like, we're here to help them achieve their goals. And so be specific to them when you're giving analogies, you're giving examples, you're communicating the value of what you do. Talk about what their issue is. Don't talk generically. That's going to really undermine your communication. 2 more things. I don't know what number this is. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This is number 6. Clear expectations. I sort of alluded to this already, but when someone thinks that you do things differently than you do it, they get very upset. You sort of get this feeling of being duped. An example I've used over and over again in this podcast, which is sort of a silly example, but there's when my ex-wife's family's from Buffalo, New York, and there's a this place that sells rolls, like dinner rolls, that everybody apparently loves these dinner rolls. And so Thanksgiving, Christmas, like everybody goes to this place and just gets a bunch of dinner rolls. So when you show up, it's just packed. Like and this is Buffalo, New York in the wintertime. You know what I mean? Like there's snow everywhere, and there's people wrapped around this building waiting for rolls. Like I personally don't get it, but I have been sent to this place multiple times to get dinner rolls because that was like my job for the day. The first time I ever went, I didn't know that this place only accepted cash. Like, they didn't take cards or debit cards or checks or anything. Not that I carried checks, but they didn't do that. And I got all the way to the front of the line, And they were like, oh yeah, we don't take credit cards. And I'm like, and I was a little upset, not because they didn't take credit cards, but I was just upset because I thought they did. And this presented an inconvenience for me. Now, thankfully, they had an ATM not too far away, which is smart for them if you're only going to accept cash. And then they let me cut back in line, which was nice because it didn't make me like more upset than I already was. But I use that as a simple example, and it wasn't like a big deal. Like nobody got into an argument or anything like that. But the only reason I was upset with that business isn't because of how they did their business, is because they didn't have it clearly stated anywhere that that's what they did. Now, I'm sure there's probably little signs somewhere around in the building, but for someone who's there for the first time, I had no way of knowing that until I got right up to the register. So clear expectations with your practice. What do you expect of people? What's going to happen? People will take advantage of you if you don't set clear expectations, or they're going to get frustrated with you if they don't understand like if you're going to charge someone for not showing up, you need to be clear about that. If you're going to tell, someone's going to they're not allowed to show up X amount of minutes late or too early, or if you don't want drop-ins, if you don't want someone to just stop by, if you don't work on the weekends, like whatever that is, like whatever the parameters of your practice, whatever they are, and you're allowed to set those parameters. I'm not telling you what you can and can't do. But when you set the parameters of your practice, you need to just make sure that the people who are participating in your practice understand very clearly what is expected of them. And if there's a misunderstanding because of a lack of clarity, that's on you. Now, some people are dumb, and some people, no matter how much you tell them and no matter how clear you are, no matter how many signs you put up, right, they're still just going to be upset. I'm not talking about those people. Like, those people probably aren't a great fit for your practice anyway, because sometimes you have to weed the garden. You know what I mean? Like, sometimes there's just like not great personalities for your practice, and it's just best to refer them out and let them go. But most people aren't that way. Like, most people can be really great patients if you groom them to be, if you teach them to be, if you help them become that. Like, good patients are not generally, they don't just stumble into your practice. Good patients are often created through good communication and proper expectations and you being the leader that you're supposed to be within the context of your practice. So if you're having trouble with patients, a lot of your patients, you're probably lacking in the communication and the leadership aspect of being a chiropractor. So that's just something you need to think about and something you need to start working on. Last thing we'll talk about is this, and I think this is super important, but I left it for last because I want to kind of end on this note, is you need to get agreement with people. There are moments in time within a chiropractic practice where you are coming to an agreement, and chiropractic is a participation sport. They have to agree to show up, and they have to agree to participate in the process. Otherwise, this whole thing falls apart. Now, I know you have to show up too, but that's not the problem, right? It's like you're going to show up. But if you want to see someone X amount of times over the next couple of weeks or couple months, or if you're hoping to see them, whatever that is, like you want to do adjustments and some soft tissue or some laser therapy or some acupuncture, whatever you think is best for this person. Even someone like when I was in practice where I did upper cervical and like I was going to adjust the cervical spine mostly and probably not going to do much of anything else in terms of adjustments. Someone has to be in agreement with that. If they're not on board with that and they're like, no, I don't like just getting my neck adjusted. I want to get my back cracked. We need to talk about that. We need to make sure that we're on the same page, that what I'm doing and what the plan is, that we've agreed to the plan. And I'm not saying that you run roughshod over your patients, because some chiropractors have a some will, some won't, so what approach to care, where they basically say, here's what we're doing. And no matter what the person says, no matter what their objections are, no matter what their life circumstances are, like, this is what we're doing. And if they don't want to do it, screw them. They're not a good fit. I don't think that's a great approach to patient management. When you sit down and you make your recommendations to someone, you want to be crystal clear. This is what the expectations are. This is what I know. This is what we're hoping for. This is what I think will happen. Set those expectations. But when it comes time to get started, or it comes time to kind of like leave that conversation, you need to get agreement with that person. That person needs to, and I'm not talking about signing a contract. I'm just talking about going to them and saying, do you understand? Is this something you can do? Like, are you on board with this? Or is there something we need to talk about? However you want to say it, that person needs to nod their head. They need to say something verbally. There has to be some acknowledgement on their part. Because if you're giving them this plan and they're thinking to themselves, well, I'm an over-the-road truck driver. I'm only in town once a week. Like, I can't come in 3 times a week. You should probably have that conversation. And if you don't open the door to have that conversation, it's entirely possible that they'll just kind of like shake their head and smile, let you adjust them, and then you'll wonder why they don't show up but once a week. And then you're going to get frustrated with them, and they're going to get frustrated with you because you keep harassing them and they're not even in town. And it's just a misunderstanding. You could have had that conversation. You could have come up with a different agreement. It could have been like, hey, doc, I'm only in town once a week. I can't do this. There's no way. You can say, well, you know what? Let's go ahead and try that. Let's see how much progress we can make with once a week, but you just need to be patient with your body because we're doing one thing once a week. Your body's stuck in this pattern, stuck in this habit. And on top of it, you're going on the road and you're beating yourself up in your truck. You just got to be patient with your body. But if you want to try that, we can try that. If I feel like we're just beating our head against the wall, we're not making any progress, I'll let you know. And if you feel very stuck and we're not making any progress, you let me know. But for now, let's go ahead and we'll give that a try for a few weeks. We'll see how it goes. Hopefully we'll make some progress with fewer visits. And then you agree on that. Like, that's the agreement. Yes, that's the plan. This is what we're doing from this point forward. But if you don't get agreement from your patients and then you have trouble with patient follow through, part of the problem is you didn't get an agreement. So make sure that when you hit these moments in time where there needs to be an agreement, that you stop and don't assume that they agree. Make sure they agree. And some of this is just being willing to have difficult conversations and uncomfortable conversations with people. It can be really uncomfortable having conversations with patients, especially when problems arise. And maybe this is something I should have talked about on here, is that the willingness to have difficult conversations earlier versus later. It's really easy to kind of pass the buck sometimes when someone does something that you really need to talk to them about. You need to address. There's an issue. And then you let it go and you let it go and you let it go. And a little problem turns into a big problem. One of the things I believe very strongly in my life is I don't believe in big problems. I think most big problems, maybe all big problems, are just little problems that were left alone. And they grew into big problems. They didn't start that way. Like, most problems don't go from like not a problem to big problem without there being these little problems in between. So if you can get in the habit of addressing little problems, and I'm not great at this, so I'm not telling you to do something that I'm just an absolute awesome expert at. This is stuff I struggle with. But if you're willing to identify or you notice that there's a problem, it's better to address that problem when it's small versus letting it turn into a monster, which isn't even something I was planning on talking about, but I think it's helpful for communication. So those are some tips. Those are some things to think about. It really is just an overview, and you have to figure out ways to kind of apply this information and get better at this stuff and work on it. I will tell you this. Here's kind of the olive branch that I will leave you with, is that the patients that you have this month that are new, they don't know the conversations you had with the people last month. So if you're kind of working on your patient communication, you're working on things like how I'm going to say this or try this or communicate it this way or do it that way, they don't know what you did with the person before. So cut yourself some slack. It's okay to kind of adapt and change and modify and try to figure out what's going on. Don't beat yourself up too bad. If you're talking to someone or you communicate with someone, or even if you mess up a relationship with a patient, I think it's good to just stop and look at it and just be honest and say, what was my part in that? If the answer is nothing, it's just a Karen, it's just a crazy person, then that's fine. That's the answer. But sometimes it's not. Sometimes the answer is like, I could have communicated better. I could have done better. I could have done something different. And you take that information and you apply it to the next new patient, the next batch of people that come in. That's the process of growth that is supposed to happen as a chiropractor. So patient communication is super important. Take these principles, apply them to your practice, commit to working on it. You'll be glad that you did. All right, guys, I'm going to go ahead and wrap this up. Thank you for listening to the podcast. Thank you for subscribing. Thank you for sharing the podcast. If you know a chiropractor who doesn't listen to the podcast, I'd love for you to share it with them. If they're a podcast listener and be like, hey, check this podcast out. The guy's got some good things to say. Sometimes he cracks a couple interesting jokes. Sometimes he talks too much, but he can be super helpful if you listen to him. That would be great. I'd love that. If you want help with your website, go to Rocket Chiro. Check out the Rocket Chiropractic websites. I'd love to help you. I'll talk to you guys on the next episode. See ya.